And that's my prayer for the whole special needs community overall. That they would know, whether they're severe or not severe, that they could live a life of purpose, of creativity, knowing that they were created to be whole. W-H-O-L-E. They weren't created to be fractured, half, or quarter. They were created to be whole. When you sow the seed, it has to reap something great.
Cheese.
Cheese.
Ryden was born on April 23rd, 2012. It was a difficult delivery, and he came out, he was blue, and I was hemorrhaging. So our journey was tough from the start. Ryden's dad has a brain injury, and so things at home was a little bit difficult to navigate. Ryden started developing typically. We didn't have any idea that he had autism. He was two years and 9 months when he was diagnosed with a temporary diagnosis of autism, because they weren't really sure what his diagnosis was. He was still talking, responding. He was losing eye contact, and his words were starting to slow down. He wasn't using them as much, but he had a full range of vocabulary. Ryden had started with an intense therapy session, and he had just ABA at the time. Then he moved on to where eventually they were able to add speech. He went to preschool at the church that we attended, and he moved on to the preschool in our local school district. The teachers there were amazing, and we could see Ryden start to progress. By the time he left there at 5 years old, he was able to start to recognize sight words, and he was able to do simple addition and subtraction by 1. When he was in kindergarten, he had a setback because of the new school. Ryden tends to be thrown off once his schedule is changed and things are different, so that was a little bit difficult for him to navigate. We didn't see much progress in kindergarten, but this year in first grade, we really saw Ryden start to blossom. At his last IEP, his psychologist told us that the numbers look absolutely horrible on paper, but that by the time he was 9 years old, she expected just a different child, because inside she could already see just the intuitiveness and Ryden, the way Ryden is just so intrigued. He's very curious, and these things are going to propel him. He's also very determined, which will help him overcome any obstacles that's before him. He's now starting to write his name, which they said he would never do. He reads a little bit. He can recognize a lot of sight words. He's still excelling in math. He's one of the younger kids in class, but he's paired up with an older child in class. And pretty much when Ryden was diagnosed by the ACE Center, we were told that he actually had global delay disorder, politically correct way of saying mental retardation. They told us not to expect much from him, but he is just starting to blossom and bloom, and it's all by God's grace that this is happening. I'm now a single mom, and Ryden gets to see his father every day. I think it's very important that the child doesn't lose contact with either parent. It's very important that we have both a mother and a father. Through our parents is how we learn how to be parented by the Lord. Yeah. So I really want to say that, because even with my husband's brain injury, he brings something to the table for Ryden, and they have their own little way of bonding and their own little ways of playing and understanding each other, and it's really neat to watch.
So what encouragement would you give to any mother out there that's in the same exact situation as they're just getting their child diagnosed?
Okay. So I would say in the very beginning, people will want to be very helpful, other parents that have children on the spectrum. And for me, I was surrounded by mothers who have children on the spectrum, and I was offered a lot of resources, but some of those resources, they will share some of the stories of more of the issues and the problems and the trials that come along. And I would say don't focus on that, because the Lord has a plan for every person on the planet. And so it doesn't matter what diagnoses say, it doesn't matter what other parents who are walking this walk are having issues with their child. I remember just being so panicked and seeing on the internet children on the spectrum, and the parents were having to restrain them and things like that. And I did that for about 6 months, and I finally had to stop looking at that and say, Lord, this is your child first, and you care more about him than I could possibly ever care about him. So I'm just going to leave him here with you, and you're going to do your will and your way. And I began to pray over him each and every night and just lift him up to the Lord. And the Lord gave me a word that he was going to talk, and he was going to be used mightily for his kingdom. And I don't share that that prophecy with many people, because it's something, when the Lord gives you a seed, you need to bury it down deep in yourself, and you need to let yourself die to any kind of expectations that you have in your situation. Disappointments are going to come if you keep having your expectations instead of leaning on the Lord. You're going to find yourself in despair, in depression, and all these things, and the enemy's going to actually try to use your child as a weapon against you, and that's not what the Lord has for you and your child. With my child, I can honestly say I am like a completely different person, and so much better than I could have ever been had I not had a child on the spectrum. I have 3 amazing adult children who were gifted, and they excelled in school. They all graduated with bachelor's and master's, and they're doing great things. But it was really a challenge to have a child that had difficulties, and if I would have just concentrated on the difficulties instead of focusing on the Lord and leaning on what he says. It says in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, it's my life verse passage. I love this passage. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will direct your steps. And I can truly say that in this journey, that's what I've had to do. And I thought I understood, and I didn't, and I've made wrong decisions, and I've leaned on myself and my own pride and the perfectionism that I've had, those things that were rooted deep down inside me because of my own issues, and instead of leaning on the Lord and trusting him that he really was going to direct my step. And it was amazing that every therapist that we encountered, every doctor, any kind of respite worker, they were affected by Ryden too. And we actually had Ryden's first aid and respite worker. She actually was brought to salvation because of Ryden, and it was just such an amazing thing to see her. And anyone that comes in contact with a child on the spectrum can't help but acknowledge the freedom that they have and the innocence. It's just so pure and just such an amazing thing to watch. And you have to reflect on yourself and say, wow, that's what the Lord wants for us. When he says that he wants us to be free in him, that's what I see. So when I see Ryden running around, and it's a scary thing when your child darts out towards the street, but he's just so free and he doesn't have any kind of restraints. And so I always take those things back to reflection, and instead of being downhearted and, oh, my child, he can run away at some time, or he can get injured, he can get hurt and be in fear, I see it more as a positive thing that he doesn't know the restraints of this world. And so when he's older and he has been healed and he's doing the things that the Lord has purposed for his life, those things are just going to help him excel in everything that the Lord has planned for him.
Well, thank you very much, Diana. This has been amazing. It's been quite a journey, and I can't wait to see what more God has in store for Ryden for all these kids.